ability are there and then decide the minor should dominate. If not entirely, for most of the melody, you notice the chorus carries a simple hook from E7 to A minor. It really designed to
6 minutes after 7 o'clock in Trinidad and Tobago. Time for Business Breakfast on a Monday, and as usual, we thank Value Optical for their continued support. Today's focus is on the budget presentation, which is just a week away. And of course, the energy sector is still very much the backbone of the economy, and therefore a lot of emphasis is placed in that direction when we're discussing the economy. Energy, gas prices up, oil prices up. They might be on a way down, but they're still higher than what we anticipated some months ago. What is the future looking like for the sector 2 years after the pandemic started? What would they like to see in the upcoming budget? As those who are very heavily involved in the energy sector. That's why we are seeking the perspective of the President and CEO of the Energy Chamber, Dr. Thackwray Driver, or Dr. Dax Driver, a doctor of history. And I'm sure he's well aware of the history and the context of not just what is happening with our energy sector in Trinidad and Tobago, but elsewhere and the global trends. Thanks very much indeed, Doc, for taking the time to be with us.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Good to have you with us. 7 days away from the budget presentation. What's your perspective?
Well, I mean, the perspective from the Energy Chamber. So, you know, we tend to concentrate quite narrowly on what's happening in the energy sector. That doesn't mean that we don't see all the other parts of the economy as being important and diversification as being important, but we concentrate quite heavily on the energy sector. And for the budget, you know, what you're really looking at the budget are the things around how the government is going to spend the money and then how the government's going to collect its taxes. So our interest is particularly around the tax system and making sure that we have a tax system. So this is what we call the fiscal regime. So it's the taxes and the royalties, how that's going to encourage investment into our energy sector, because that's the key thing that we need. And this, as the Prime Minister was talking, he'd come back from his visits to BP, Shell and to Proman, and he was talking about, you know, we need this investment if we are going to have a future to our oil and gas industry, and also then to the wider greening of those industries, the decarbonisation of the industry. So what we're really looking for is what are the measures that are going to be put in place, the taxation measures that will encourage the investment into the energy sector, because that's what we need.
Are you satisfied that we're heading in the right direction? I know that there would have been the energy conference, there would have been proposals to the government based on what might be anticipated in the budget presentation. Are you satisfied that we're heading in the right direction in that regard?
I think we're satisfied that there's an understanding of what the issues are and what's needed to be changed. What we need to see now is the action to make those changes. So we've had a lot of announcements in the past about, you know, intentions for action. Those things have to be carried through. We have to see those come to fruition and to actually see those changes being made. So in the budget last year, the Minister of Finance announced that there was going to be a in-depth review of energy sector taxation with changes to be made. We were told that was going to happen by the end of the first quarter of 2022. It hasn't happened yet. We know that they know the issues, but we need to see the action being taken now.
Just give us your sense of the environment that we're in right now, because as you mentioned, the Prime Minister made those visits to some key energy partners for us here in Trinidad and Tobago. We know what is happening globally because of the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. Gas prices are up, a lot of things are up. Are you willing to even forecast where this thing is heading?
Well, you know, I don't get involved in forecasting oil and gas prices. I think all you can forecast is that no one really knows, and expect the unexpected. You know, we're in a situation now where you know, you have these extremely high gas prices in some of the key markets in Europe in particular, also in Asia. High in North America, but not nearly as high as they are in Asia and in Europe in particular. And you know, that wasn't really predicted. People did see prices going up because there was sort of a period of underinvestment during the pandemic. But obviously the big change there was the change with Russian gas. So that has really sort of, you know, changed the geopolitics of that. But those things can change back again, and they can change in different ways, and investment will be going in. So the expectation is that prices will vary, and we need to plan for the potential that prices will go down in the future.
Well, given that you were here expecting to hear something by the end of the first quarter and that didn't happen, would you like to get some detail at the budget presentation come next Monday afternoon as to whether or not this whole revisiting of the structure, whether it's taxation or pricing or whatever it might be, that would be discussed in the budget, that would be presented?
Certainly, that's exactly what I think the industry is sort of really hoping to see, is actual concrete proposals being made. There's a bid round in execution at the moment, so there is a process of asking for companies to bid on onshore acreage and some very shallow water acreage in the Gulf of Paria. There is an intention to go for companies to bid for shallow water off the east coast and some off the north coast. Next year, there's an intention to go for a deep water bid round. If we want those things to be successful, and you want to see a large number of international companies in putting forward bids for that acreage, because the more companies put forward bids, the better offer you get as a country. We need to have the fiscal regime in place, which is going to attract that investment. So this is urgent for the country that we get this done.
Does that suggest that right now a lot of the energy, the big players, are waiting and watching?
Yes. That's what's happening. I think that a lot of the time people are weighing their investment decisions. Remember that these international companies have the entire world to look at. So they're looking, where's the best investment to be made. And it's important to recognize that they're not saying that based on today's oil price and today's gas price. They are saying, will that investment make sense over a 20-year lifespan, with the likelihood that prices will go down at some stage in the future. So they will run the economics not on $90 oil, they'll run it on $40 oil and $50 oil. So the system we have in place needs to make sense. There's various different price points. What we have at the moment in Trinidad's fiscal system, particularly for oil, gas, there's some different issues around royalties, but for oil, we have this particular problem with something called the Supplemental Petroleum Tax, SPT, and the way that it kicks in when oil prices hit $50 for most producers. That means that anybody running the economics at $50, they are losing money, and people then are not going to assign capital to invest in Trinidad if they're going to be losing money at $50, because that's a price which you might well see again in the future.
Are we? Because if I could just, we're seeing a lot of instability in Central Asia as well.
Right.
And I'm sure you're following what is happening.
Sure.
It seems as if what Russia has done has awakened concerns in Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan and quite a few of those areas. I mean, it's not something I suppose you want to put your house on, but is there the feeling that there might be greater instability in Central Asia that could keep energy prices up?
Well, predicting those geopolitical changes to prices is very, very difficult. No one predicted a pandemic. We had negative oil prices,
Yes.
just over 2 years ago. So, making bets on that, companies don't make. They're not gambling here. They will base their projections on what they have seen in the past and what likely sort of oil prices might exist, and they will make their investment decisions based on that. And they have opportunities around the entire globe to look at where the best opportunities are, and they will place their capital where the best opportunity is for them to get a return on that capital, a secure return on that capital. That's just the reality of the industry that we're in. And I think this was clearly recognised with the Prime Minister when he came back from his trips from Europe recently, and he was very clear that if we don't change things, we are going to see Trinidad's production will continue to fall, and then the country has a really serious problem.
And change things could be at two levels. Change things as far as our production capacity, or change things as far as those financial arrangements. Because I suppose the question is always asked by the ordinary citizen: are we really getting value for whatever we produce? Because I think that the public fully understands that we are not a big player in this. We are price takers in many ways, but is it that we are being called upon now to give up too much for those big investors to stay here?
The oil and gas in the ground has zero value until it's produced. So you have to attract the capital, which is billions of US dollars worth of capital to produce that oil and gas if you're going to monetize it and have any revenue coming to the country. Leaving oil and gas in the ground in a world which is moving towards net zero carbon emissions makes no sense from an economic planning point of view. We are in a situation where the window for oil production in particular is narrowing. There is plenty of oil in the ground in the world. Okay? The problem isn't producing the oil which is in the ground. The problem is that people are trying to produce that quickly, because the last people producing, the world will go on producing oil, but the last producers are going to be the most cost-effective producers, where people can continue to make money even at a low oil price, because demand for oil is going to start decreasing over the next few years. Electric car sales are doubling. When you have anything, and that's the major consumer of oil, is for transport. When you have anything where it's doubling sales in a year, that trend goes it looks slow at first, because it's going from 1% to 2%. Then it goes from 2% to 4%, then 4% to 8%, and then 16%, and then 32%. And suddenly, people are buying only electric cars, and there's no gasoline cars being bought anymore. And that means that global demand will fall. So that the window for producing oil is narrowing. Every year it's narrowing. And we need to say, if we've got this resource which we want to sell to the world, we've got to start to produce it as quickly as we possibly can. Every year we waste is a potential that we're going to have oil left, which will have no market in the future.
Have we lost too much ground, though?
Yeah, we have lost too much time. We need to accelerate. We're behind where we should be, and we need to accelerate fast, yeah.
So therefore, if we're talking about, again, framing our discussion in relation to the budget, apart from those taxation and royalty issues that are clearly key to keep those big players here, is there anything that you'd like to hear in the budget presentation that would suggest that there's a real interest now in really getting on with the game that we are already falling behind?
Well, so the first thing is the realization we need to change the structure of taxation. If we hear that, then I think people then say, okay, look, this is really being thought about seriously. Second part of that then is that what are the measures which are going to be put in place to help us decarbonize our industry? Okay? We have a great opportunity with our petrochemical industry to bring in other ways of producing hydrogen, which is the basic feedstock which we get from our natural gas. And the natural gas is used to produce hydrogen, which then goes into our ammonia and our methanol production. You can also produce hydrogen from other sources, particularly from water, and you can do that using green electricity, from solar or from other low carbon forms of electricity. That can give us a future to our petrochemical sector as well. So it would be also good to hear those elements around how we're going to green and decarbonize our existing industry. We have a great opportunity with the industry that we have. That puts us a little bit ahead of other people, the fact we have this big industry. But if you don't decarbonize it, you will lose your market. There's going to be what they'll call a carbon tax, border taxes. So this means that the amount of tax that you have to pay to take petrochemicals into some of the key markets, particularly into Europe, this is where it's going to happen first, will depend on the carbon footprint of what you produce. If you cannot reduce the carbon footprint of what you're producing, then you won't be able to sell that. So I'd also like to hear some announcements around the intentions in that area. We have a big solar project which was announced 2 years ago, which has not begun construction yet. It'd be great to get some really just key, the ground will be turned to begin construction on this date. It'd be lovely to hear that as well. I think that'll give people some confidence, because people are a bit, okay, this thing was announced 2 years ago. There's been ongoing discussions to finalize the final agreements. We say the construction's supposed to be beginning this year, but until the final agreements are signed, it'd be good to see that, because that'll give people a bit of confidence. You've got a big, the first big solar project happening, and then what's going to happen with future solar projects and how we're going to bring wind power into the mix as well. So those are sort of things I'll be listening out for as well.
There seems to be a significant implementation deficit in Trinidad and Tobago, and that is no secret. In fact, I thought the solar energy thing you were talking about was the one that the EU supported and was announced just a couple months ago.
No, that's the one for Piarco.
Yeah.
It's good that's happening, but it's tiny compared to the one which is supposed to happen. The one which was announced 2 years ago is a major project. It'll be by far the biggest solar PV project in the entire Caribbean, delivering electricity at the lowest cost for any renewable energy project in the Caribbean we've had so far. So it's a major project. That was announced 2 years ago, over 2 years ago. There's been negotiations going on for more than 2 years now. They're very, very close to the final agreement, but it's not actually signed up yet, and the construction has not yet begun.
Is the window, or it can't be closing because we have to think of those renewables, but do we have the window as far as the increasing revenues since the Russian invasion that would accommodate thinking about wind farms on the Atlantic coast and those sorts of things? Are they pie in the sky?
Those things are not pie in the sky. They're very achievable. There's a big study has been done recently by National Energy on the use of wind. It's sort of a scoping study on the use of wind to generate electricity, to put that into producing green hydrogen, which can go into the ammonia sector, which then gives us longevity in our petrochemicals. So those things are all very feasible, but you've got to make them happen. Things can be feasible when you sort of look, put it on a piece of paper and you say, okay, look, you work out the numbers make sense, the economics are there. But until you actually then go and do the detailed study of wind and then you approve wind farms coming forward, then it is just scoping, and we need to get that action. So I think that's what the focus which we're looking for is. The talk is great, but you've got to follow the talk up with action. And that's what I think everyone is looking for in this budget. And
in conclusion, Dr. Driver, we want to thank you as usual for taking the time to be with us this morning ahead of the budget presentation. In summation, in a few seconds, if you can, talking about talk with the budget presentation that's going to be next Monday afternoon, just repeat what would give you confidence. What bit of information would you like to hear that would give you confidence that we are moving in the right direction?
The bit of information which should give me confidence is a clear announcement from the Minister of Finance that oil and gas tax will be changed. The reforms which have been talked about will be implemented by the end of this year, so that as we go into next year, those will actually be in place in law. Not talked about as an idea, but actually implemented.
Dr. Thackwray Driver, thank you very much once again for taking the time to be with us this morning. So many issues in relation to energy and diversification and green energy. And again, we've been slow on the draw on this one. We've been caught in the crease. We've been caught in the starting blocks. The race have almost gone down the back stretch, and we're still in the starting blocks. But let's see what comes up with the budget presentation. As we head to the break, let's check out this image of a cactus taken by Violet for us. Very nice indeed, as we head to another break.
Man, stop shooting up and show.